Welcome back. An ecosystem is a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact with each other and with their physical environment. In this video, we'll cover the structure of an ecosystem, how energy flows through food chains, ecological pyramids, and nutrient cycling. Let's begin. An ecosystem has two broad structural components. The abiotic component includes all the non-living physical and chemical factors, like temperature, rainfall, soil, and sunlight, that shape which organisms can survive in a given place. The biotic component includes all the living organisms, and they're functionally classified into three groups. Producers, mainly green plants and algae, are autotrophic, capturing light energy through photosynthesis to manufacture their own organic food, and they form the foundation that all other life in the ecosystem ultimately depends on. Consumers are heterotrophic organisms that depend directly or indirectly on producers for food and they're further divided by their diet. Herbivores like deer are primary consumers, eating producers directly, while carnivores that eat other consumers are a secondary or tertiary consumers. Decomposers, mainly bacteria and fungi, break down complex organic matter in dead organisms and waste products into simpler inorganic substances, a process called decomposition, which releases nutrients back into the soil for producers to reuse, making decomposers absolutely essential for nutrient recycling. A food chain is a sequence of organisms in which each one feeds on the one before it, transferring energy along the chain, for example grass to deer to tiger. In nature, food chains rarely exist in isolation. They interconnect extensively into a food web, since most consumers eat more than one type of food and are in turn eaten by more than one predator. And this interconnection makes ecosystems more stable and resilient than a single isolated chain would be. Energy flow through an ecosystem follows a crucial rule: it is strictly one-directional, or unidirectional. Energy flows from the sun to producers to consumers, and it is never recycled back, unlike nutrients. At each step or transfer between trophic levels, only about 10% of the energy is passed on to the next level. This is called the 10% law. The remaining 90% is lost mostly as heat through respiration and other metabolic processes. This 10% law directly explains why food chains rarely extend beyond 4 or 5 trophic levels, since so little usable energy remains by the time you reach the top predators. Ecological pyramids are graphical representations showing the relationship between different trophic levels in an ecosystem, with producers forming the base and successive consumer levels stacked above. The pyramid of numbers shows the count of individual organisms at each trophic level, and while it's usually upright, it can sometimes be inverted. For example, a single large tree. One producer can support a huge number of insects feeding on it. The pyramid of biomass shows the total dry weight organisms at each level, and it's typically upright on land, since producer biomass usually exceeds consumer biomass, but it's characteristically inverted in many aquatic ecosystems, since the producers there are phytoplankton with very small individual biomass but extremely rapid reproduction rates. The pyramid of energy, however, is always upright, without exception, precisely because of the 10% law. Since energy is progressively lost at each transfer, the energy available at any trophic level can never exceed the energy available at the level below it. This makes it the most fundamentally accurate way to represent trophic relationships. Unlike energy, which flows one-directionally and is ultimately lost as heat, nutrients are continuously recycled between the living biotic community and the non-living abiotic environment, a process called biogeochemical cycling, or nutrient cycling. In the carbon cycle, atmospheric carbon dioxide is fixed into organic compounds by producers through photosynthesis, passed along food chains, and returned to the atmosphere through respiration by all organisms, and through the decomposition of dead matter by decomposers, with additional carbon released through combustion of fossil fuels. In the nitrogen cycle, atmospheric nitrogen gas, which most organisms cannot use directly, must first be converted into usable forms like ammonia through nitrogen fixation, carried out by specialized nitrogen-fixing bacteria, including free-living soil bacteria and symbiotic bacteria living in the root nodules of leguminous plants. This fixed nitrogen is then further converted by nitrifying bacteria into nitrates that plants can absorb, while denitrifying bacteria eventually convert nitrates back into atmospheric nitrogen gas, completely. The cycle. These continuous nutrient cycles are what make long-term ecosystem stability and productivity possible. Decomposers playing an absolutely central role by releasing locked-up nutrients from dead organic matter back into these cycles. Let's recap. An ecosystem combines abiotic factors with biotic producers, consumers, and decomposers, the latter essential for recycling nutrients. Food chains interconnect into food webs, and energy flows one directionally, obeying the 10% law at every trophic transfer, which is why the pyramid of energy is always upright, unlike the sometimes inverted pyramids of numbers and biomass. And while energy is lost as heat, nutrients like carbon and nitrogen are continuously cycled between living organisms and the physical environment through biogeochemical cycles, with decomposers and specialized bacteria playing central recycling roles. That's ecosystem. Remember, energy flows one way and is lost as heat, nutrients cycle round and round forever. See you in the next video.